Jesus, only begotten Son of God. In this diagram before us, we see the human spirit represents affection, consciousness, intuition, and communication. The soul represents the mind, will, emotions, and imagination and intellect. The body represents flesh and blood. The Spirit of God without measure, the veil. The whole Spirit of God, human spirit, rational soul, and body is Jesus. Jesus is not just human spirit, rational soul, and body, but the entire person, including the Spirit of God without measure. The veil represents the flesh of Jesus, separating the will self of God from the will self of man. Jesus Christ in the days of his weakened, sinful flesh must be considered from 2 points of view. One, deity, the other, man. The man was the Son, whose existence dates from the birth of Jesus. The deity dwelling in him was the Father, who, without beginning of days, is, alone, eternal, pre-existent. The eternal Christ power veiled in flesh and manifested through the flesh. This is Jesus Christ, the true deity, whom to know is life eternal. This is established by what Paul described as the mystery of godliness, God manifested in the flesh, justified by the Spirit, seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received up into glory. 1 Timothy chapter 3 and verse 16. Compare also Luke chapter 1 and verse 35, Matthew chapter 1 and verse 20, Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 6, Matthew chapter 3 verses 16 to 17, Luke chapter 4 and verse 18, John chapter 3 verses 34 and 35, John chapter 5 and verse 30, John chapter 7 and verse 16, John chapter 14 and verse 28, Acts chapter 2 and verse 22, and Acts chapter 10 and verse 38. The deity of Christ is not to be considered as consisting always in an incarnation of the Father, but the Father manifested by the Spirit. The deity of Christ is more complete now when there is no incarnation at all than it was in the days of his flesh. See Luke chapter 13 and verse 32. In him dwells all the fullness of the deity bodily. See Colossians chapter 2 and verse 9. In what does this deity consist? In the Spirit physically corporealized. He is the Lord, the Spirit. God is Spirit, and He is the same. In what did His deity consist in the days of His flesh? In the same Spirit, resting cherub-like in measureless outflowing of the Spirit on the body prepared by and for it, of the seed of David according to the flesh, for the doing of the will of the Father, for the sanctification and redemption of the children. See Hebrews chapter 10 verses 5 to 10. But this Spirit and the Father cannot be separated, for they are one, as a flame and the light of it are one. The Father dwelling in heaven in light unapproachable, and the Spirit radiating from him, filling heaven and earth, are one Father, who says, Do not I fill heaven and earth? Jeremiah chapter 23 and verse 24. How the Father tabernacled in the body prepared could say, Destroy this temple, a symbol of the body, and in 3 days I will raise it up. John chapter 2 and verse 19. Surely the lifeless body taken down from the cross was not deity. Can deity die? The deity departed from him in death and returned at the resurrection.